let's look at some veterans who might have their fantasy value dinged a little bit by what happens on Thursday night and beyond. I want to start out with the team that has trendy, or it's been trendy to mock a receiver to them, and that would be the San Diego or the Los Angeles Chargers. Um, that I think that Keenan Allen, in and of himself, is a very good player, but the durability with him and Mike Williams, a little suspect. And then Keenan Allen, obviously, he's entering his 10th, 11th year in the league at this point, so we're getting up there, and the depth chart behind those two is bleak, to say the least. So it would definitely make sense for the Chargers to be targeting a pass catcher with their first pick. But I think tight end is also in the mix potentially. So your thoughts on Keenan Allen right now, and even Gerald Everett?
Yeah, so like you said, they could be looking tight end in the first round, and there's a couple different ones they could be looking at. If you're a Keenan Allen investor, you want it to be Darnell Washington, but just as likely, maybe more likely, it could be either of Dalton Kincaid, who I don't actually like very much, but apparently is going to go high, and Michael Mayer, who I think is quite good. So those two are options in the first round, and then the Chargers could take a receiver in the second round, or I can't remember if they have a third rounder. But in the second round, they could take somebody. I think Jalen Hyatt's going to go later than he's been projected generally. Like you've seen kind of an assumption that he's a top 20, top 25 pick for most of the offseason. It just doesn't hold up. And I think not only is Hyatt going to fall a little bit, I'll say this about Kincaid too. I'll be enough of a hater to say that whoever takes Dalton Kincaid and Jalen Hyatt is a team that does not draft well. And so to me, Dalton Kincaid is clearly, John, going to either Washington at 16 or the Chargers. And there's just no question in my mind. It's going to happen. He's going to go to Roshan Johnson's going to go to the Chargers, et cetera. There's certain players who can only go to certain teams, and Kincaid to me is one of them. But if the Chargers take him, then Everett is toast. And as much as I'm bashing Kincaid, part of why I don't really like him that much is because there's only one way he can help an offense, which is drawing targets. But he can definitely draw targets. So if he's playing reps that Gerald Everett had last year, then yeah, Gerald Everett's just crossed off on that basis. But Keenan Allen's target rate could be subject to decline too, because Kincaid's going to draw targets a lot faster than Gerald Everett did, and he's going to do more with those targets than Gerald Everett did. So I think Mayer would do more yet, and I think he can clearly block a lot better than Kincaid. But if Kincaid ends up with the Chargers, it's a problem for Allen, and that's even before the question of like if they add a receiver in the second round. There's also, I think, I won't call it likely or especially likely, but I still think there's a chance that we get closer to training camp and the Chargers threaten Keenan Allen with a cut if he doesn't accept a pay cut. And he could be on another team, of course, if that happens.
Right. So all of that is to say, maybe press pause on your share acquisitions of those guys right now. Someone who is a little bit, further down the ADP radar, but I think people have some optimism in a second year breakout for Khalil Shakir. But are you concerned that there could be a receiver that catches the Bills' eye at 27?
Not so much 27, but I think that in the second round, there's a pretty high risk they take a receiver. And the question, other than like what the Bills are even trying to do at receiver, the question is what would be available to them at that point. And at that point, guys like, ex receiver candidates like Quentin Johnston are going to be off the board. Maybe Mingo's out there, but I would be surprised if they're looking that way as much as the slot, because I think they're still chasing that Beasley season, that one good Beasley season. And I think when the Bills coaches front office look at what happened the last couple of years and trying to explain what could we have done better, like they're looking at the last offseason and they're like, well, we took James Cook, we tried at running back, we signed Damian Harris, we tried that. All there is left to do is at that point you can either reason we need to bench Gabe Davis, which I don't think they should. I think they're using him wrong and could use someone else better for the tasks that they're assigning to Davis. But if you replace Gabe Davis with Jonathan Mingo, A, I don't think Mingo wins that starting job. No. B, you're kind of just paving over yourself. Like you're not introducing a new variable. But as much as I like Shakir, and I do like Shakir, I think he's clearly a startable prospect in the NFL. He is probably not better as a slot specialist than Josh Downs is. And Josh Downs, I think, makes tons of sense in the second round to the Bills. And, that he's too small to play outside wouldn't matter because he's only going to be getting slot reps anyway. So I think they would be better off moving Gabe Davis actually into the slot and getting someone fast to run the Gabe Davis routes. But short of that, I think Josh Downs is probably, if only because I don't expect Flowers to fall to the second round, I think it's going to be Downs. And I think it's
okay.
Shakir will still be useful to the Bills, but he's going to be more like a swing backup at outside and slot rather than a starting slot.
Right. So that therein lies the problem. Still, potentially, if there's a decent discount in the best ball market after, then you don't have to guess which weeks he's going to be useful. But for redraft, that definitely would hurt Shakir as well. Taking a look at the Giants and their receiving core, so that they added some guys that this offseason. Obviously, you bring in Darren Waller, you bring in Paris Campbell, you have the emergence of Isaiah Hodgins to carry over to this year. Darius Slayton is back, but I think that there's still some sense out there that they could be looking at a pass catcher in the first round where they're picking. So who are you pressing pause on when it comes to getting shares in this Giants pass catching group?
It's mostly just Hodgins, but I guess also that he was marked for regression regardless of what the Giants did. And I think Hodgins' utility to them is kind of like what Shakir is looking at with the Bills. It's like Hodgins would be a good swing backup between the slot and the outside because he's kind of too slow to be a great boundary threat from your own 20. But in the red zone, he could probably play outside. If the field's smaller anyway, there's nowhere to run anyway. It doesn't matter as much that he's slow there. But the rest of the field, if you're at your own 20, generally you want a player like Hodgins in the slot, or at least, I don't know, maybe you want it to be like 3rd and 6 or something like that. You don't really want to send him 15 yards downfield. So basically, when you look at Hodgins' numbers from last year, his average depth of target percentile outpaced his air yardage per snap percentile, which basically means he was lucky to draw as many targets as he did on the snap count that he did, or else he would have had more air yardage per snap. It would have been more in line with his average depth of target percentile. But basically, he was not drawing targets at the depth as much as the field. And so the target rate could decline, and the catch rate definitely will. He almost caught like 80% of his passes with the Giants, and Daniel Jones is not completing 80% of his passes to anybody 2 years in a row.
No.
So, yeah, I think Hodgins is marked for decline for those reasons alone. But if they add Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston, then he's definitely a swing backup. Like he will not be playing in the starting outside sets if Darius Slayton and Quentin Johnston or Jordan Addison are on the team.
Yeah, so I think Hodgins is definitely at risk of having his value diminish, and then we'll round it out with this one, a little bit of a deeper cut, but one that's near and dear to my heart because I have a lot of shares of him from like the 19th round, especially in the big board, the non-super flex edition. But are my Jake Ferguson shares about to appreciate similarly to Zoidberg's sandwich heavy portfolio from the Business Guy episode of Futurama, as in not well?
Well, I think Ferguson's a good player. It's just part of the problem for fantasy is he can be good without drawing targets. And I also think that the Cowboys just kind of like running multiple tight end personnel, especially if they keep any of the tempo that they showed the last couple of years. Like you're going to need a lot of reps. And so Ferguson could play 40 snaps or something like that, just not do that much. But also what's at risk here is the Cowboys could take, I guess the worst case scenario would be Michael Mayer. And if they take him, Ferguson is going to the bench and the snaps that he gets are less likely to have viable routes than, if Mayer were not there. If it's Darnell Washington, then Ferguson and him are kind of stuck in the same boat. It's like, we're going to play a lot, but we're not going to get a ton of targets. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the reason to hold off on Ferguson is not because he can't be good, but just that if the Cowboys surprisingly don't draft any notable tight ends, then I don't think Ferguson's price will rise. I think it's like already at the highest it can get. So at the very least, I would wait till after the draft. And if Dallas doesn't take Washington, doesn't take Mayer, then I doubt you'll have to pay any more than the people who took Ferguson earlier. Also, real quick, John, I wanted to mention too, KJ Osborne is actually one that I'm worried about because I just think that clearly he's going to be doing a lot of blocking and stuff. And also I think you have to worry about them getting Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston, either of which I think would draw targets faster than Adam Thielen did last year.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think Osborne, as it stands, is overexposed as their wide receiver too. I think where the Vikings are, that's a sweet spot to grab a receiver. But that's going to round it out for our Underdog segment, breaking down some veterans who are at risk of losing some fantasy value in the wake of the NFL draft. Again, go ahead, sign up at Underdog using that promo code RWNFL. Get that first deposit matched up to $100 and get a free 6-month subscription to RotoWire.